what I take away from those moments, and that moment in particular, was the importance of putting your ego aside and really being present with the team you have, and ensuring that you understand that regardless of your position in that organization, your position within that team, you're all peers, right? And so you have to treat each other with respect and dignity and care, and again, in order to build the trust. So that for me was sort of an important life lesson at that time.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Burnt Chef Journal, a hospitality-specific podcast dedicated to challenging mental health stigma and conversations designed to inspire a new, healthier, happier, and more sustainable hospitality profession.
So it is September now, and hopefully this episode gets released for you guys very, very shortly, certainly within the month of September as we approach autumn here in the UK. And I know varying degrees of temperatures around the rest of the world. So this week's guest, we've got our sponsor on, Planday. And before you turn off and think, oh God, it's going to be a hard sales pitch, this is a really cool conversation. A mixture of a little bit of business information with a little bit of personal stories and lessons learned from CCO Kris from Planday. And well, it's informative, it's fun, it's lighthearted, it's a fantastic episode that I think that you'll all really, really enjoy. And thanks for sticking around with the Burnt Chef Project and the Burnt Chef Journal. This is now our third year of this journal, and yeah, numbers continue to grow. We're on 120,000 downloads for this podcast now. So if you haven't yet shared this podcast with friends, family members, others that you think might be interested in mental health, in leadership, in well-being, in culture, in just general conversation about real life, like no BS, real life conversations, then share it with them. Let them know via social media or via WhatsApp that this podcast exists, because it's one of our biggest areas of resource and free access of content. Right, I'm blabbering. Without any further ado, let's get cracking with this week's episode.
The Burnt Chef Journal is proudly sponsored by Planday, the workforce management system that helps your business give a shift. From scheduling rotas ahead to tracking time and attendance, managing your team's careers to managing your budgets, Planday has everything you need to make your day work in one easy-to-use platform. Try it yourself with a 30-day free trial only at planday.com. Get your shift together with Planday.
Okay, and we are live. So, hello, and welcome to another episode of the Burnt Chef Journal, our bi-monthly podcast dedicated to raising awareness for mental health, but also to start tackling some of the biggest subject matters within hospitality on a global format. This week, I am joined by not just a guest, by our sponsors of the podcast, Planday, and I'm joined by Chris Blaine, who's the CCO of Planday, over in Copenhagen at the moment. Chris, so welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. We're keeping all the good weather here in Copenhagen. Hopefully some of it will skittle back down to the UK soon.
Yeah, well, we woke up this morning to 9-degree temperatures in the early stages of September. So the general feeling in the UK, I think, is quite somber at the moment. We're still waiting for summer to begin. So, yeah, any little bit of sun you could send over would be fantastic. But
no worries.
we were just chatting offline about the topics of conversation today. And one being our sponsor, I think it's brilliant to have you involved because Planday have been very supportive of the Burnt Chef project in terms of working with us on the single biggest shift campaign, which we'll talk about in a moment, as well as additional supportive systems as well, and financially supporting the project. So first and foremost, thank you for that, because genuinely we wouldn't be here without the support of our sponsors. So that means a lot, and I think it's pertinent for me to be able to thank you for that. So for those who haven't heard about Planday or heard about what Planday is, are you able just to give a little bit of background for our listeners, to give a little bit of detail, if that's okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, let me just respond to your thanks and say we're thrilled to be a part of what you and the rest of the Burnt Chef Project team are doing, and all your ambassadors. For us here at Planday, our vision is to make shift work more human. And I don't know what is more human than caring about an individual their health, their mental well-being, and ultimately succeeding and thriving in whatever they choose to do in life. So we're honored ourselves to be a part of the work that you do there, Chris. So thank you for having us as well. Yeah, a little bit about Planday. Yeah, so Planday is a workforce planning and management system, overall management system. Fundamentally, we focus on the important need of shift-based businesses to schedule employees to meet their customer needs and demands, to be able to track time and attendance, and then ultimately down the road, output to a payroll or output to some other reporting mechanism that they might have. And so at its core, we help businesses plan their rotas. And so our platform was built fundamentally on the important need for being able to schedule employees across multiple hours of operation. Our founder is still with us today, who came up with the idea for the product, and he came up for that idea here in Copenhagen at a nightclub that he was a bartender in, and was frustrated with being able to get his staff in and on time and be fully staffed to cover the needs of his customers. And so, he and his partner designed the product 20 years ago, and fundamentally it does the same thing today that it did 20 years ago. And so it's a really important tool, I believe, for shift-based businesses, because not only does it give the business control of helping to meet their customer needs, but it also puts more control into the employees' hands in helping them to manage their schedules and their work-life balance as well. And so here at Planday, we're passionate about ensuring that, we serve those who serve everybody else by giving them the tools and technology they need to ensure they have a great work experience and a great life experience.
And it's a fantastic tool. I mean, I've not actually used it myself from an operational perspective, but I've spent time with your teams in Copenhagen, and in terms of product development, in terms of tweaks, I've spoken to many clients and many friends of the Burnt Chef project who have used the product. And it's definitely it's the future of functionality when it comes down to shift management and rota management. And I think, to put it into a question format, is how have you seen the attitudes of shift workers change post-COVID? Because you mentioned a little bit about, it's good for the employer, but it's also good for the employees. How have you seen the mindset shift since COVID?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Chris. I mean, I think COVID obviously changed so many things for everybody. And I think in the shift-based world, or shift-based businesses, what it fundamentally changed was it started to put power back into the employees' hands, because businesses coming out of COVID were scrambling quickly to bring on talent, scrambling quickly to reopen operations at their full schedule. They had to go out and find that talent. So that talent had many opportunities and options with which to consider certain employment paths. And I think what's happened as a result of that is employees are expecting now more flexibility in how and where and when they want to work. And employers are struggling to find a balance between that power that the employee now has, because they have a myriad of opportunities in front of them. And, how do they deliver that in a way that supports their business outcomes? Right. And so that connection point between, hey, I got a business to run and I got to have employees in here doing this work so I can fulfill the needs of my customers, with, hey, I'm an employee and I want to work this way. So how are you going to help me work this way? And where tools and technologies like Planday and others help to support that is through connecting those two needs, right? The employee need and the business need, right? And allowing a seamless communication between the two, allowing some more flexibility in the way businesses plan and employees take shifts and schedules. But we're not quite there yet, Chris, to be fair, right? Like, there's still a lot of work to be done to ensure that businesses are doing a better job in helping and serving and supporting their employees in what they're looking for in their work-life balance as well. So, I think coming out of COVID, there was a little bit of a shift in power. It's helping. Tools like Plandays and others are helping to facilitate that communication and conversation between employers and employees. But there's still a long way to go in terms of really creating an environment where both the business and the employee can feel successful.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I think that the conversations that we're having with both our stakeholders and our partners, operational-led businesses, and also our community, is really evident of that. There's almost an equilibrium being reached, but by butting heads of employees are, rightly so, for a long time, work-life balance has been a distant dream for many people in hospitality. They're getting a better level of work-life balance, but then also employers, as going, well, we've done what we've done and what we haven't done before, so that should be enough, and we'll stop now. Whereas employees are going, well, yeah, but I'm still working 60 hours over 4 days rather than 5 days now. And there seems to be just that little bit of movement required from both sides to really just nail that final nail in the coffin and be like, okay, so we have got an environment that is conducive to health and well-being, and most importantly, the biggest topic of the day, which is retention, right?
Yeah, 100%.
It's something that we see time and time again.
Yeah. No, I was also going to say, Chris, there, just in regards to that. Yeah, I mean, I think just again, sort of reflecting from a business owner's perspective coming out of COVID, you think about the financial impact that these business owners took, right? And so, they're scrambling hard to find ways to get back to a level for themselves, right? For their lives. I mean, in many cases, these are self-owned, self-run businesses. They're trying to recover. And so their priority is figuring out a way to, how do I recover the business? And sometimes the employee experience can be put on the back burner relative to that. And I think, to your very good point, continuing to find a way to create a better connective tissue between both of those needs in support and in service of delivering better outcomes for the business through employee retention, right? And ensuring that you have a continuity of operations as a result of that. Super, super important.
So I'm going to flip-flop a little bit. We'll come back to Planday in just a second, but you're an experienced operations manager, commercially driven. You're looking at how you can manage the profit and loss of an organization whilst also the delicate needs of the team. And so from your experience, have there been any situations where, perhaps for operators listening now that are in that current situation where they've taken their eye off of the culture, they've taken their eye off of the needs of the employees? Have you been in any situations like that? And if so, how did that impact the teams, and what did you do to remedy it?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to say I'm new to this, Chris. I've only been at it for a few years now, but after a long career and long history, luckily this is a podcast and people can't necessarily see the gray hair, but no, I've certainly experienced quite a bit of that in my career and in various management roles. It's interesting. I kind of harken back maybe to the early days for me, just in line with sort of the types of businesses and customers and employees that we're appealing to with this particular podcast. And I used to be a professional dancer, so I used to be an entertainer. One of my roles that I fell into multiple times was the dance captain. Now, the dance captain in a professional musical or performance or show is responsible for ensuring that the staging is accurate, right? That the dancers are where they're supposed to be. They're coming on in the right lines. It's good structure, right? Everything is working effectively. And also coaching and teaching dance moves and stuff like that. But as a young leader, and I know there are a lot of young leaders in the hospitality industry out there, a lot of first-time managers, a lot of people who were the best waiter and now they're managing the shift or whatever. My belief was, well, I know what to do. I know all this. This is how you do it. I do it right. You're just going to do it the way I do it, right? And what I learned very quickly was, while I have a very strong individual personality and ego, so does everybody else. And what I found through this experience and what I learned in that I took with me throughout my whole career was the importance of listening, connecting, understanding individuals' perspectives, having empathy, caring about what they thought, caring about what they wanted, what they needed. And I learned very quickly, after some pretty negative reviews from the management company that I was working for on my employees, that is the dancers' experience, was that I just wasn't listening. And they didn't feel like I cared about them. And they didn't feel like I was in their corner. They felt like I was just in it for myself. And I probably was back then at that age. And so one of the real important lessons I learned from that, and what I think I've tried to take with me throughout my career, is if you want to build an effective culture in any type of organization, regardless of the industry, regardless of the size, it has to start by understanding that the culture is built not by you, by the people that work with, for, and frankly, around you, right? If you sort of pivot this now to the topic on hand, which is hospitality in general, and in serving the needs of these employees in these hospitality businesses, sit down and talk about what is it that you need from me as your team lead, as your manager, as your owner, whatever it might be, the role that you're playing, and start listening to what their needs are. Because as soon as you do that, you unlock trust, right? Trust starts to become real between you and your employee. And that is so critical and key to building a strong culture. So yeah, I'd say, in my life, I've experienced quite a few situations where having to rebuild trust and rebuild a culture through allowing the teams that I work with to have a voice, to be heard, to share their perspective, to have that taken into account, not always agreed with and not always implemented the way they may want, but still giving them the voice and an explanation as to why we might need to go a different way. At least you start to build that trust with that organization. And ultimately, frankly, at its core, that's what's going to build any great culture.
Man, that's pretty profound. That's hit a nail on the head. Like, I was at an event yesterday with one of our trainers, Michelle Marino, who's a leadership coach. And a lot of the topic of conversation at the moment is connection. And actually, I think in hospitality specifically as well, but also as a young manager, and we know through data and stats, which we'll come on to in a second with the campaign, but we know that there's quite a large proportion of the demographic is relatively young within hospitality, right?
Yep.
For anyone who is perhaps over the age of 30, 35, 40, listening to this now, just think back to when you first, similarly to your story, had that. I know everything. You don't need to tell me anything because I've got my goals. I see the goal being here to here, and that's it. We're going to go straight there. But in reality, in order to build a strong culture, you have to go around a long way. And ultimately, it's the individuals who are going to get you to that point rather than you driving them to that point. Does that?
Yeah, 100%.
There's a Simon Sinek quote there, isn't there, somewhere, which is
probably.
You're not there to be in charge. You're there to look after the people in your charge.
Yeah, that's good. I haven't heard that. That is a good one. Very true. Very true.
True. So you learned from that. So what, bearing in mind, we're not giving away ages here, but like what age were you at the time? Where did that paradigm shift really take effect?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I was probably 23 at the time. So on my first professional gigs as a performer and entertainer. So pretty early in my career. I'm from the States, if you can't tell. I'm not originally from Copenhagen. So a lot of us get our careers going sometimes a little bit later in the 20s. But yeah, so I was pretty young still. But I would say, Chris, like, I'm always learning. I'm now 55 and, constantly learning every single day. The stuff I break and go, oh, damn, that wasn't good. I probably need to do that a little differently. So I'd love to say like the life lessons I've had throughout my career have completely turned me in this work of marble management and leadership. But, I'm a constant work in process. There's a comedian who tells a funny joke about this idea of this individual is like this perfect work of art and everything that they do is great. And they're like this building that's just constantly got scaffolding up around it and just constantly being worked on. And sometimes I certainly feel that way as a leader. But what I take away from those moments, and that moment in particular, was the importance of putting your ego aside and really being present with the team you have and ensuring that you understand that regardless of your position in that organization, your position within that team, you're all peers, right? And so you have to treat each other with respect and dignity and care. And again, in order to build the trust. So that for me was sort of an important life lesson at that time. And then, we could spend hours talking through all the rest of them, but I don't want to bore your audience with that.
I'm not bored. Like, you've got my full attention, and hopefully my audience or our audience will be exactly the same with that as well. I think it's these sort of, I don't think there's enough open conversation. We're taught even at school level to be curated or molded and to live life by certain values and certain ways that conform to certain societies' rules, etc. But one thing we're never taught is actually to necessarily own our mistakes, but also to discuss our mistakes and discuss our learnings. And that's one thing that holds us back, I think, as a society, is that one thing that really resonates with audiences when I speak on stage is the fact that first thing I say is I make mistakes. I'm going to make mistakes during here. And do you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to call them out as well. Yesterday, I asked someone to throw me something on stage and they logged me this can of cider, right? And I grabbed this cider in the air and everyone was like, whoa. And I was like, yeah, I used to play rugby. And so to show off and my ego got the better of me, threw the can up into the air. I was like, and then I dropped it and it fell about 2 meters onto the floor and everyone was like, you're an idiot. And I was like, yeah, I am, because I'm human. And I'm like, I'm going to make these mistakes. And do you know what? I'm going to keep riding it down. And there's a certain relatability. And I think that people can learn from that is that you don't, I think certainly with technology, I think we're bred to believe to be perfect. You have to be infallible, you have to be perfect, you have to always be on the go, but actually life isn't like that, and conversations like this. So when you say I've got loads more stories, I mean, hit us with them. Like, I think it's important, it's a good learning.
Chris, let me interject something there, because I think you brought up a really interesting point. I have 2 daughters. My daughters are 28 and 26. They've gone through a very different life than I went through, growing up 30 years before them, and for the obvious reason, and we can all bring up and talk about technology and social media and all the things that have impacted people's lives over the course of the last 10 years. But for me, in this context, you just said the most important thing that I think has really hurt the growing youth / young adult population, which is the need to be perfect. Right? And social media facilitates an environment where you want to show your best self. You want to show your best perfect picture or your best perfect moment, right? Because you're judged on that by how many thumbs up you get, how many people comment on it, how many people do whatever. And I think it's really unfortunate, because while I think social media has its place in connecting people, in sharing experiences, and in maybe experiencing life through others, and just, sort of living vicariously, right? What it does, especially to those that are more impressionable and haven't yet figured out that they're going to drop the can when they throw it in the air, and that's okay, is that, I got to catch it every single time. And if I don't, what's wrong with me? Why am I failing at this? Right. And now this weaves into the whole, from my perspective, the whole purpose and mission behind the great work you and your team do, which is, you are flawed. It's okay, right? That you have to be good with who you are. You have to find peace in that. That's the only way to find a way to really great mental health and well-being. I mean, there's lots of other things around that, so not the only way. But I certainly think that's been a really impactful thing that's affected individuals growing up today that I didn't have an experience, right? I didn't have to feel like I was perfect all the time in anything I did, because I wasn't on display all the time. So anyway, just an interesting nuance to your catching the can story, and how I think the young adults growing up today that are getting into business and are starting to learn their way, they put a lot of pressure on themselves. And I think it's unfortunate, because they don't give themselves the ability to feel like they can fail and that be okay.
Brilliant point. A really, really poignant point.
If you're enjoying this week's episode, consider heading over to our website and supporting our ongoing work in destigmatizing mental illness and creating a healthier, happier, and more sustainable industry by purchasing some of our branded merchandise. We have a whole range of t-shirts, hoodies, chef's jackets, well-being journals, plus a whole host more available on worldwide dispatch. All funds raised from sales of these items go towards free-to-access e-learning content, as well as providing free support systems and help for those who may be experiencing difficulty with their mental health.
It is interesting. Like, when you think about it, what am I, 38 now? My generation was the last generation to experience life before mass adoption of mobile phones and technology, right? I didn't get my first mobile phone until I was 17, 18 years old. So I'd already had an adolescence life where I didn't know what was going on in the world around me on a daily basis unless I watched the news, which was brilliant. My life was so much simpler back then. Yeah, I think there is this pressure to conform, to be perfect. But interestingly enough, when you look at trends on social media, and I don't spend a great deal of time on social media now, if I'm honest. When you look at trends, there's a big following for behind the scenes style content, where you have, maybe you'll have a woman modeling bikinis, but they'll model it as a model would do, and then they'll actually model it in real life. And they're like, this is how much there is. It's just BS. Ultimately, it's all to do with angles and stuff. And people really, really resonate with that. So I wonder whether or not there's going to be a resurgence where people are going, do you know what? I'd rather not see the fakery. I'd rather see the real stuff. And I think, there was no specific point to that, but there's a psychology there that I find quite interesting.
Yeah, I hope that's true. I do hope that's true, because I think it'll be much more healthy for everybody. And listen, as I said, I'm not here to cut down social media. Like, obviously, that it has its value in the world today, and it is just a part of the world we live in. So either get with it, or I don't know what you're going to do. Like, you have no choice. You got to just figure out a way to operate with it, right? I do hope your point is well taken, and that doesn't surprise me at all. All of these fatty trends that have occurred throughout our lives, right? I remember when people would wear shoulder pads in their shirts and feather their hair down the middle. Like, that changed quickly, right? Now it'll probably come back, right? But so all this stuff goes through cycles, and hopefully that's the cycle that we're going through with social media. But certainly, the impact that it has taken on individuals coming up in their professional lives has been profound. And that impact on their mental health has also likely been very.
Yeah, for sure. Shout out to curtains in the 90s, if anyone will.
We could go back to 90s and 80s. I got all sorts of things we could talk. OP shorts, jams. Like, there's a whole myriad of things. We just don't even want to go down that dark.
It's coming back though,
I know, right?
I saw someone wearing flares the other day. I was like, where'd you get those from? A retro shop? And they're like, no, they're in fashion. I was like, come again? Flares. They were in fashion back when I was 17, 18. They were in fashion back in the 10s as well, in the 70s, 80s. But it's mad. So one of the things that, talking about technology, and to bring us sort of back onto track on the single biggest shift campaign, is we did a networking lunch recently with Gen Zs, and a lot of people are talking about Gen Zs, but not actually inviting Gen Zs to speak, which I find ironic. And so one of the topics of conversation, one of the things that really bugs and grinds my gears, and I know it does with a colleague of mine as well, is the thought process that Gen Zs aren't as resilient as we used to be. They're not resilient anymore. They fall over on a breeze. And this was a question that we posed to one of our Gen Z guests, who was a bartender in Bristol, and shout out to Mimi, who very graciously, literally the day before, agreed to be there, who I fortuitously met. And I posed this question to her, and I said to her about resilience, and she said, Chris, I find that offensive. And I said, cool, like, why? Why is that offensive? And she says, we live in an age where my boss or my manager can text me the day before my shift, or can contact me outside of work whenever they want to, and we're expected to be responsive. And she said, perhaps resilience isn't what you think it is in terms of physical or mental resilience. Perhaps it's actually being able to not pick up that phone or not respond, or how to respond to your manager when you're being contacted outside of work, out of working hours, which I just found completely, I was like, yeah, do you know what? Yeah, that is resilience. That is completely different. From the work that we've done together and Planday continue to do on the single biggest shift campaign, what sort of has been the key learnings from that age group? And that, again, I still struggle with this because we never had generations. Like, we had post-war, but what has been the biggest learnings from Gen Zs? Who are Gen Zs, first and foremost, for anyone who doesn't know what age demographic Gen Z is?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked me, because I was about to say, now, which one of the generations is Gen Z again? Are they? They're not the millennials, right? That's before Gen Z, and then after Gen Z is a new one, right?
I think I'm a millennial. I'm getting nods.
You're a millennial.
I'm getting nods. Yeah, I'm a millennial. So which is 86 onwards, I believe.
Okay, so Gen Z is 95, 96?
96. I'm looking at my colleague just for some reassurance here. Yeah, so 96. And then I think that we are on to so anyone who's sort of 9, 10 now is Gen Alpha, I think.
Okay, Alpha. We've gone with Alpha.
Apparently. I mean, Gen Alpha indicates to me that these guys are going to save our planet.
Seriously, that is a lofty title to live up to. Gen Alpha? Are you kidding me? You are the top, man. Tippity top.
Boomers was a good one, but Gen Alpha, I think,
Yeah.
takes it. So from Gen Zs, and the single biggest shift campaign was
Yeah.
sort of quite heavily focused around not necessarily millennials, but the current generation of hospitality.
Yeah.
Has there been any learnings with the relationship to technology and to their relationship with work-life balance?
Yeah, definitely, Chris. Well, first and foremost, just to sort of set the stage, we went out and did some. We had heard, you hear about all the challenges that the hospitality industry faces, specifically here in the UK. How you can't retain your employees, people are jumping around between jobs, et cetera, et cetera. So, we decided to do a little bit of research and understand the general, I don't know if mood is the right word, but the general mood of individuals who are working within the hospitality industry in the UK. And also to get a sense for what would make a difference for them. And so just a couple of really interesting and important statistics. So the first one is close to 70% of the employees that we spoke with are considering leaving their job within the next 30 days. So when you think about turnover in this industry, in this space, it is real. It exists, and employees are constantly thinking about ways to go someplace else. Add to that, when you think about what the current state of the hospitality industry is in the UK, you've got roughly 61% of businesses who have a staff shortage, meaning they're unable to fill their roster, right, with the appropriate staff to meet the needs of their customers. Right? So you got a whole bunch of people that want to leave. You got a whole bunch of people that need to hire a bunch of people. And one of the main reasons we found that employees are leaving is because they have no control over their lives. Roughly 70%, 69% get a week or less notice as to what their shift and their schedule is going to be for that week. And in certain cases, like 24 hours notice, which is just impossible to work with if you are trying to find a way to both live a reasonable and fulfilled life and make the money that you need to make to do that and to learn and grow and develop in whatever career choice you have. Right? So that's a real problem. Add to that of the people we spoke with and what we've learned from you all here at the Burnt Chef Project, that over 80% of people in the hospitality industry have suffered some form of mental illness in sort of their careers here, right? So they're struggling with this. They're suffering mentally as a result of it. Poor mental health, poor well-being and mental health. And of 53% of them are having stress and anxiety, which is, for me, like sort of the heightened version of mental health and well-being. When you get to stress and anxiety, now you can't operate, right? You are definitely personal experience with anxiety. And I know, like, you completely can't operate at all. So now you're getting to really severe mental health and well-being issues. Right. So all of this stuff is going on. They're not getting visibility into when they can work or when they're going to work. They're stressed about it. They can't plan their lives. They have no visibility into sort of what kind of income they're going to earn. Right. I don't know what my shift schedule is going to be. Am I going to have enough shifts? I got to pay my bills. Am I going to be able to make that? So all of this stuff is adding up. So what is the single biggest shift about? It is about encouraging and helping businesses, UK hospitality businesses specifically, to think about planning ahead. And why does that matter? Because when you ask these same employees, they say their lives would dramatically improve if 67% they said their lives would dramatically improve if they just had a week or two's more notice as to what their shift was going to be. Mm-hmm. Right? So you match these two things up and you think, wow, this is a really important problem to solve. And actually, I think there's some easy ways to solve it. And if you did solve it, you're going to also help these individuals feel better about themselves, feel more committed to the work that they're doing, right? Feel more committed to the company or the business they're working for, and thus ultimately getting to the point you were making earlier around ensuring good, strong employee retention, right? So there's a lot of things we can do to help support and serve that. But ultimately, in the end of the day, the single biggest shift is about encouraging UK hospitality business to plan ahead. Plan 2 weeks in advance. If you can get to 3 weeks, that is optimal. Optimal is 22 days in advance. That's the best. Now, if you can go beyond that, awesome, right? And there are businesses that certainly do that. But what you're going to find if you do that is that you're going to have less sick leave, Employees are going to show up for their shifts because they're planning ahead for their shifts. They know when they're coming. They plan their lives around them. And you're going to improve your productivity overall, and you're going to generate much more profit for your business. Because not only does it help them for you to plan ahead, but it ultimately also helps you in your business planning, right? To be able to get ahead of what resources you're going to need at what times, right? To solve and support your business needs, which is ultimately bringing customers in, serving them effectively, right? And generating profit from that. So that's what the single biggest shift is about.
Brilliantly explained as well. Have you done that before?
You know what? Listen, to be fair to your audience, right? I'd like to say I'm the understudy in the musical theater performance. I might be the backup. I'm an American football fan. I'm the backup quarterback. I mean, Rebecca Billingsley, who has been a part of my team here at Planday for the last year or so, is the brilliant mind behind the single biggest shift. And she, as you well know, Chris, and have worked very closely with Rebecca, she has immense amount of passion about this topic. And she is really leaned into this. So I'm stepping in as Rebecca is off enjoying the world right now. But I've heard her do it a lot. So, as somebody who comes from a performing background, I'm just basically mimicking or aping what she has said in the past.
Well, do you know what? Had you said nothing, you lifted the curtain there. But yeah, had you said nothing, I don't think people would have known. I think that it's you've done a tremendous job, and I think you summarized the points exactly. I mean, one of the reasons why we partnered with Planday on this, you guys wanted to do this. You came to us and said, we've got to try and use our technology and use our knowledge, not even Planday's technology, because it's not exclusively for Planday's customers. We've got to give people the tools and knowledge to be able to overcome a hurdle. And what hurdle have we experienced here at the Burnt Chef Project? And it's been time and time again, it's that rota management element. It's that people not knowing when their shifts are, not being able to plan family occasions, or we work to live, not live to work. And somewhere in the journey of hospitality, or that got forgotten, you had to sacrifice your health, your family, your life, your time in order to have a career in what I believe is one of the greatest professions in the world. So when Planday came to us and said, how can our technology help with this? We had to use data, and we had to back that up with this campaign. We had to be able to accurately show with a decent data set what it is that what was occurring and where we can get to. So I guess for those who, perhaps they're not using Planday, perhaps they're using Excel spreadsheets, or perhaps they are using someone like Access or whoever it might be, what have been the key first steps from people who have made that transition from maybe doing the rotas every Sunday night before Monday to maybe even a week to 2 weeks in advance? What have you seen from people who've made that transition?
Yeah, like I said before, first and foremost, I think you lay out a really important point there, which is the technology is nice. It helps, but it doesn't solve ultimately the problem. The problem is ultimately solved by you deciding you're going to take a change. You're going to make a change. You're going to embrace this shift, right? And you can use Excel to do that. You could use a whiteboard to do it. You could use anything you want to do that. As I said, technology can help, but ultimately it's about the mindset of making that shift to scheduling ahead and committing to that for your employees. The second thing I'd say is where we've seen the greatest success here is where businesses, owners, managers of teams within hospitality are committed to their people and are committed to solving for their team, because they've realized that their team is ultimately what's going to drive great customer experiences. And those customer experiences are ultimately going to result in great profitability and growth. That is a proven equation across pretty much any business, right?
Yeah.
Treat your people well, they'll treat your customers well, you'll make more money. So first and foremost, just start by investing in your team. And you can do that pretty simply by sitting down and saying, hey, we need to get ahead of this rota planning. Let's talk about how we do that best. Here are my business needs. Tell me what your needs are. And let's talk about how we find a good balance between these things, right? So it starts with the conversation. It starts with listening. It starts with engaging your team, getting input from them, and then deciding how you want to move forward. Now, once you've got all that, you're focused on your team, everyone's feeling like you've got their best interests, at least at heart. Then what I would recommend, and what we're seeing businesses do, is say, you know what, I'm going to commit to just doing 2 weeks now. I'm just going to do a 2-week schedule, communicate it to everybody, let everybody know we're going to be flexible here. If we need to move some things around, we'll talk about those things. But let's just try to set something in place for the next 2 weeks. And then when I get to the end of this week, I'm going to do it again. I'm just going to push it out another week. So I got another 2 weeks in advance. Then I'm going to do it again. Then when you get comfortable with that motion, now you can move to 3, even 4, right? Because now you've built the muscle in the organization to understand how to work that way. People are going to be more satisfied. And as I mentioned, what we're seeing in the data that we have from the customers who have embraced this, they have less churn. They're retaining their employees. Employees are showing up for their shifts. They're not calling in sick, right? Because they have something else going on, or they're legitimately sick, right? From stress, anxiety, or something else that's going on, right? So you're going to get much better output from them, and they're going to satisfy your customers a lot more. And that's exactly what we're seeing for those businesses that have embraced it. In fact, earlier today, before we joined this call, Chris, you told me this story about a customer of ours, they happen to be, that is doing this. And per your own words, and you can tell the story yourself as well, but they're finding it much easier to keep their employees satisfied, happy, and retained, right? And that's really ultimately what matters here. It takes a very small thing to do, but it has a huge benefit and a huge impact.
Yeah, and true. And to endorse that point, yeah, I peered over someone's shoulder whilst it wasn't even work orientated. It was a day off. I peered over someone's shoulder and they were using your product. And I was like, oh God, I love this opportunity. I'm always curious. Like, how was the experience of whether it's our service or someone else's service or one of our partners? Like, what is it really like? Remove all the sales BS. Let's find out what it's really like. And he was like, oh my God, it's been a game changer. He said the fact that he has been rotating 3 weeks in advance and he has got the ability to swap shifts and stuff. And actually he's found that to be a real key benefit, that has not just made his life a hell of a lot easier, but also made his employees' life and his team's lives a lot healthier and happier. Going back to your initial point, and a point that I really, really think that we should just drive home is that you can have all the technology in the world, you can have all the education in the world, but if your mindset is that's impossible, it will never work, which is what you and I hear all the time when we start this conversation, then it's never going to work. Like, Rome wasn't built by someone going, straight roads. Yeah, all right, that'll never work. And we saw it, we even saw it during HRC where we had Luke Holder, who's a previous guest of ours, talking about the fact that he wrote us 6 months in advance. You tell that story to most people and they're like, nah, you're talking out your ass. There's no way that that's possible. Yet you sit him down with Luke and he's more than happy to explain how he does it. And they're like, and all of a sudden that perspective, that curtain's been lifted and they go, perhaps it is possible. And then you can access technology and education and
right, exactly,
learn how to do that, right?
Yeah. Once you're committed to it, right, the technology's there to support you, no doubt. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there were some really key stats like employee turnover. And when you look at 30% of employees leaving jobs within the first 90 days.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Average tenure being 56 days and turnover rates in hospitality. I mean, the really good businesses that we work with, hotels specifically, are really quite good with retention at about 36%. But, nighttime economy sector, you're looking at anywhere between 125 and 400%. And this is one of the key components to getting that turnover down and getting that retention up.
Hey, Chris, one other thing just to add there, just as a data point, you're asking just about some of the other things we hear from our customers. One of the things, as we talked about planning in advance and just starting simple, starting small, using whatever technology tools you want. In addition to solving the important need, not just for your business, but for your employees, as we've been discussing, you're going to find over time, you spend far less time doing it, right? Because you're not constantly chasing it. Just think about any task you do in any work or anything in life, right? When you're constantly waiting to do something, it is constantly a burning fire for you. When you start to build a muscle of getting ahead of it, it's going to be easier. It's going to take less time, right? And all of a sudden, that task that sucks that you got to do every Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, whenever the heck you do that task for this upcoming week, and you got to do it, you got to do it fast, you got to get it out to everybody, you got to make sure that anxiety for yourself is going to go down, right? So, in addition to the obvious benefits of the employee satisfaction that you're going to drive, it's also going to be a much better work-life experience for you.
Yeah, for sure. It's a ball ache. Whenever you speak to anyone about rota management, they're like, "Oh God, it's the worst job. I hate it." And that's because they're leaving it to last minute and they're having to do it every single week. Whereas if they do it once, spend an extra hour on it, utilize technology, utilize education, and do it once every 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, then it's job done,
exactly.
right? And
exactly.
a few changes here and there. So what's next for the campaign then? I mean, we're still looking for people to pledge, and there'll be a link in the show notes for this. So, and the pledge isn't that you're signing yourself up for a free trial of Planday. The pledge isn't that you're going to make rotas a year in advance. The pledge is that you're interested and you want to learn more, and that you're committed to trying to get those rotas even extended. Where are you currently, and extending it from where you are. But what's next for the campaign trail? Because this is still ongoing.
Yeah, I will say that was an excellent summarization, and we are looking for some new marketing talent, Chris. So you just let me know if you want to come join us. I have a role for you if you can execute that well. No, no, you nailed it though. This is absolutely not about Planday, right? Planday is passionate about what we do. We're passionate about making shift work more human. The single biggest shift isn't about Planday. The single biggest shift is about bringing awareness to what we believe is the biggest challenge that hospitality businesses face in the UK. Planning ahead is the single biggest thing you can do to improve the lives of your employees, to improve the outcome for your customers, and frankly, ultimately to improve your overall business. So that's what this is about. It's thesinglebiggest.shift.com, which, as Chris mentioned, he'll put in the notes following, is about pledging that you're going to start that process with whatever technology or tool you choose to use. And also, it's about education and bringing to light some of the challenges that hospitality businesses like yours face. Stories from individuals who have done it and what they've learned from it. Stories on other things that they do to drive employee happiness and satisfaction. So not only is it a great place to go for just making a commitment to yourself and getting involved in the conversation, but it's also a great place to go for some education and content. And, so the next steps for our campaign is to continue to lean into exactly what we're doing. We're pretty early in our journey. We kicked off this campaign around 7-8 months ago. We still believe it is the single most important thing for us to do in our roles to bring awareness to the challenges the hospitality industry faces in the UK. So we're going to continue to lean into that. We'll be available at certain events as well, speaking more about the single biggest shift. So for us, it's more of the same and continuing to lean into helping support hospitality businesses in the UK to make that shift and make that change.
And I must say, from a personal level, you guys hosted me in Copenhagen back in March, I want to say.
Yeah, that was fun.
People were dipping into the water and it was 1 degree outside, which apparently is the norm in Denmark and Copenhagen. Yeah. The team, from the technicians to the sales team to the marketing team to the after customer service and after customer support, after sales support, are genuinely dedicated to making this change and being able to elevate people's opportunity to have a longer, more healthier, more sustainable career in hospitality. So irrespective of whether or not you're in the market for this, and we don't exclusively sign ourselves up to one product or another, I think that there is no getting away from the fact that there is an educational resource here. There's data points, there's support that can make a profound difference to your life and to others around you. And I would urge all of you to take a look. If your curiosity has got the better, then do take a look. There's a jar of profound knowledge and input there for yourself. We've spoken in person. So is there any final point or anything from a personal level that you feel that leaders, individuals considering a career or looking at improving their career in hospitality should know?
Yeah. The only thing I would say, it's important as a leader to reflect on how you show up for your team and how you develop empathy for them, for their challenges, for the things they need most from you as a leader, from the company you work with, to help support them in their lives and their growth, their development, and what they're looking to pursue, right? But it's also important on the other side, right? For employees to understand that businesses have to run. They need to make money. They need to be able to operate effectively. So the only thing I would encourage anybody who's listening here is that it's so important to have empathy for the other person and realize that maybe with the exception, I hope it's the exception of some cases, people are doing their best to do the best in their job. They're doing their best to try and make a difference. And sometimes those things just bounce into each other and they don't do it well, or something goes wrong. But having empathy for that and understanding for that, I think that's the biggest thing I would encourage everybody to do is have some empathy, open an ear, listen, communicate, talk, thank people for what they do. And I think, a little bit of kindness and happiness injected into the way we work together, I think will also make a huge difference in addressing some of the challenges that we ultimately face. So that was a little, I was thinking back on that. I'm like, oh my gosh, that was a little ethereal, but I truly believe it's true, right? I truly believe if you can just inject a little empathy, happiness, thankfulness, gratefulness sort of in the way you operate with each other, everybody's going to be better off. So yeah, I just encourage everybody to be thoughtful about that and understand that everybody's working hard to achieve something, right? Let's acknowledge that, and let's be empathetic to it, and let's try to find a way to talk about it and find a better path forward.
For sure. I think that's a brilliant point to end this on, and one that we should be more conscious of moving forward. Try walking in someone else's shoes.
Yeah.
Just for a while, because you never know. It wasn't until I was chatting to a chap recently who runs a business locally to me, and from all intents and purposes, he's incredibly wealthy, well off, and we were talking recently about how much to pay team members, and we both agreed that in both of our cases, sometimes we were paid our team members more than we were paying ourselves, and that actually there were other things that were going on, perhaps fortuitously. He had a low or no mortgage, and there were a few other things that went on, but actually my perspective on things, or people's perspective on things, wasn't the reality. And sometimes it's that curiosity and that empathy is important to be able to understand that your restaurant or pub owner, or if you are a pub owner, you're going through some hard times. It's challenging. You're probably working on 80, 90, 100 hours a week. And yes, your teams might be working more hours than you'd like them to, but you're trying to survive. And I think that sometimes it's having that open dialogue with each other and sharing that empathy is important. So it's a really, really lovely point to end on. Chris, I look forward to seeing you hopefully very soon.
Same. Come back out. You can jump in the canal again. Or they call it the harbor here, but I call it a canal. But
it's beautiful. If you have never been to Copenhagen, please do go there. It is, it's a beautiful, beautiful city.
It is indeed.
And nice approach to well-being as well. You're currently stood up. I can see you leaning over on the desk because we've been chatting for an hour now. Yeah, there's adjustable benches at the Planday office, and
that's true.
Boards, and lots of more bicycles you can shake a stick at.
That is also true. There's no shortage of bicycles around here. That's definitely.
Well, I think one of the facts that one of your teams told me is there was double the amount of bicycles than there are people in Copenhagen.
Yeah, I heard that too, and I believe that. I have 3 bikes myself, so I can imagine. I don't know why I have 3 bikes, but I do.
Well, I still have this vision of when we went out for dinner one night. It was absolutely peeing it down.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And you're like, I got a half an hour, 40-minute ride home. Okay, off I go. You change from your business attire into what can only be described as just a giant waterproof boiler suit and a high-vis boiler suit. Rode home. And
it's right. There's no bad weather, only bad clothing choices, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, thank you very much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
My pleasure as well, Chris. Thanks for having us. And again, thanks for all the great work you guys do at The Burnt Chef. It's a pleasure to be a part of.
Cheers, man. Thank you.
Cheers.